I started a TV show on Netflix. We all know I don't watch anything at all television-wise.
What did you start?
Are we recording?
Yeah, we've been recording for the past 5 minutes.
Superb.
Lockwood & Co., which is a book series by Jonathan Stroud, which I didn't even know about until last night after I was 5 episodes in, and then I realized I had 3 episodes left because Netflix is Netflix and canceled after the first season. It's really good. I'm really mad.
Yeah, that does check out for them.
And yes, Stranger Things continues to get paid. Oh, I'm sorry. Stranger Things.
We'll talk
Shame.
about that actually, possibly within the episode, because it connects to our topic, which is world building.
Yeah, I could see that.
You're spoiling it already?
Well, welcome to the Semi-Bookish
The
podcast.
great thing about world building is it's hard to create spoilers with world building. Not impossible, but...
Okay.
Welcome to the Semi-Bookish podcast. I don't know what episode this is, nor do I really care to look for it.
89.
Oh, 89.
Are you serious?
Oh.
I don't know what number it is.
I think we're somewhere in the 60s. 60s or 70s.
Still pretty high.
I'm in my
To be
30s.
honest, I have no idea.
Sorry, that was a bad joke.
I really could probably go on Podbean and look, but, that's a lot
Why
of
don't you
work.
just tell us what you're reading instead?
Yeah. So I'm starting Lockwood & Co.
Okay.
That's what I'm reading.
Okay, all right. All right. Because you love the show.
I liked the show.
Yeah.
I haven't finished it fully yet, but I know it covers at least possibly the first book and maybe the second.
Probably. I don't know.
It's a 5-book series.
Yeah, it is.
Lockwood & Co. is.
Yeah.
And basically it's I don't know if it's a current day or future London. They never really expand upon it in the TV show. But the whole entire
I always thought it was set during Sherlock Holmes's time.
To be honest, I have no idea because in the show it's all modern. It's It's
I don't know. I haven't.
So they updated the story?
Yeah, it's modern day age-ish. And
I haven't read the book, so I don't know.
So the premise of it, and this is just me going by the TV show at the moment because I haven't actually opened the book yet because I requested it today. I was so excited when I saw we had it on the shelf. I was like, ah! Anyways, this premise is there's a problem, and that's what they call it. They call it the problem.
Okay.
And the problem is essentially that all of these ghosts are basically coming, they're manifesting, and they're causing a whole bunch of problems. And there's 2 different types of ghosts. You have your type 1, which is kind of your easy to deal with kind of simple ghosts, and then you have your type 2s, which are very malevolent and poltergeisty and disgusting.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a fun word for poltergeist.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's a disgusting ghost in my house. It's awful, man.
I mean, when they do weird things in your house, how else are you going to describe
That's
it?
true. That's true.
That ghost is trash.
So, children over the age of, over 13 or older can do this, but, children have been manifesting with talents. And by talents, I mean psychic powers that could help locate the ghost, detect where the source of the ghost is. So, your supernatural style, here's their, bones, or here's, their specific object, and you have to get rid of the object.
Sure.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, the show follows Lucy, but I know that the books are kind of amongst a whole different group of people from what I could see. So it follows Lucy initially, and Lucy is 13 years old, or she's supposed to be 13 years old. Here's the thing. They mention that she's 13 in the first episode, and then that gets thrown out the window, and they're drinking beer in the kitchen.
You see, she's actually a 13,000-year-old.
So therefore, I don't know if they changed the ages of drinking laws or whatever in this future / modern age. I don't know. I'm not really gonna try to figure that out. Yeah, the book will tell me, and I'll be able to come back next time and tell you. But her mom had, spoiler alert, the book has been out for at least a decade now, so whatever. It's been out since at least 2013.
Oh.
So her mom signs her up to become one of the talents at a ghost agency. There's all these different corporate agencies that you can go to, whatever. her mom signs her up to learn how to become one because of family issues, which I'm not going to get into because that's a little bit spoiler territory. But what happens is they go out on a ghost hunt, the teens do, and it goes wrong. Completely wrong. Like,
Well, of course.
she is the only one left.
Oh.
She's the only one surviving, except for her best friend, who is in what you could best describe as a coma, but it's a ghost-induced coma.
Okay.
It's called Ghost Touched, and there's like a whole entire thing about it. So her friend is still in the coma, and everyone in the town and her mom basically blames her for what happened, even though this was her first time doing anything. And the adult completely like just didn't do anything at all. He's watched it quite literally happen and then ran away. So her mom was like, you have to go apologize so you can go back in because we need the money, da-da-da-da-da. And so she runs away to London. And then she ends up looking for all these different ghost hunting agencies, and she ends up at Lockwood & Co., which is this group of two teens, who are like completely against the whole corporate style of way of doing things, and they are more like, we're just gonna ragtag in, we're gonna figure it out how we do best. And so she ends up with them, and there's like a whole slew of, because there's 5 books, there's like multiple different things that they have to accomplish. But from what I could see so far in the show, they end up like uncovering a murder in their first like gig together as a group of 3.
Sure.
That leads to a whole entire larger conspiracy within the corporate ghost hunting empire that exists in the London area.
Sure.
And that leads to a whole entire bigger thing.
Sure.
Fantastic show. Really sad it's only 1 season. Found out there were books on TikTok yesterday when I was in episode 5, and I was crying about the fact that, I can't watch the rest of the show because there's no season 2. Thanks, Netflix. And so I grabbed the books, so here we are.
There you go.
Grant.
Nice.
Well, first off, I'm looking at the clear barrel that would keep all of the.
Are you looking at the one that's open right now?
Yeah, I am, and it's making me. I love it.
What does it say?
Duolingo bird. So I can't wait until one of us gets that.
Oh, that's for the fighting thing.
Yeah.
The death match. Duolingo bird is one of the characters.
Listen, once you sign up to start a language,
Duolingo bird really just goes for you, man. Instead, try Mango, which exists at the library. Congrats. Anyways.
He's a bird of sheer will.
Because Mango languages won't yell at you as much as Duolingo bird.
Yeah.
I love you, Duolingo bird. Please don't come for me.
Grant, what are you reading?
I just started All Things Cease to Appear, which is a book by Elizabeth Brundage.
Oh.
Brundage.
It's a fun last name.
Yeah, it is.
Brundage.
Yeah, it's a good name. What's it about?
It's about a murder. That's the inciting incident. We're jumping. No. The Google. Well,
Everything we're reading has murder in it.
it does. Yeah. This guy's murder. This guy's wife. This guy's murder is wifed.
Yeah.
This guy's
Wife.
I just dealt with a lot of super kids dressed up as superheroes.
Yes. Grant has had a fairly socially interactive afternoon.
Yeah, I'm drained.
So Grant needs hibernating.
Yes, the Google Books description is ghosts murder a terrifying psychotic who seems normal and beautiful writing.
Really? That's the Google Books description?
There you go.
Oh, actually, that was a Stephen King quote. So I guess he read the book too.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not super far, but so far this this man, he's married, he has a infant, not infant, like a walk, they can talk a little bit. A young daughter.
Perhaps a toddler.
A toddler, that's the word I'm looking for. He has one of those things.
I don't know how to say words anymore.
Yeah. He has a toddler, and anyways, his wife's murdered with an axe.
Well, that's one way to do it, I guess.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
And he's the prime suspect.
Oh.
And
that's usually how that goes?
Yep, and I've already felt a very subtle supernatural overtone. So I don't know how that's going to come into play. I don't from the
demons possessed the husband, and that's why he doesn't remember it.
Maybe it doesn't seem like that kind of book.
Yeah.
So
Maybe there's a group of mushrooms that are underneath the house that possess everyone in there, and whoever gets on the property is possessed by the mushrooms.
I feel like you're referencing a book you read recently.
I am referencing a book I read recently. It was a book club book a couple months ago. It was my book club book a couple months ago.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
No, so I like I said, I'm not super far into it, but when I initially read the synopsis, it was checking all my boxes.
Sure.
Multiple timelines, an unsolved murder that ripples through time.
Sure.
And so I'm just excited to see where it goes. It's written well so far, and so if Stephen King likes it, I guess I'll give it a shot.
That's a glowing endorsement, honestly. So I am. I'm trying to see how many hours left in this book. Oh, all right. Yeah, I got 2 hours. Okay. So I'm 4 hours and 21 minutes away from finishing Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell.
Are you going to continue on with the series?
So I have like 9. It's not really a series, so this.
But you know what I mean.
Is the first book. The second book is a completely I think it's set in the same galaxy, but it's a completely different story. I might read the next one. I don't know. I am less confident that this is going to end. Well, because of the recent developments in the story, like you find out that there are 2 characters behind things that you kind of knew already. Like you're like, yeah, they did have villain energy, so it makes sense.
The vibe was there.
According to them, they didn't do the murder that's being investigated at this portion of the book. So it seems to me as though the culprit behind the murder is not going to flesh out as well. It might. I don't know, because this is, in so many ways, this is a fantastic debut. It is an incredibly well-written book, particularly for a debut. So I do think that if she doesn't stick the landing, she might be able to be forgiven, which I don't say that lightly, because I don't like when authors can't stick the landing. New or not, stick the landing. But she is juggling a lot, and I do think that she may have bitten off a little bit. But I'm a fan of that. I'm pro biting off more than you can chew, because that gives me more reasons to like what's going on. It also gives me more reasons to dislike what's going on. But I really, really loved. I think the romance is solid. It's the best part of the book. I think the romance does so much for the other parts of the book, which is rare, because oftentimes the romance is either there because you have to have romance, and it's not really like Han Solo and Princess Leia's romance is thin.
It's just there.
And it's just there because, someone has to fall in love. Why not them?
Somebody has to kiss to make this movie interesting. Why not it be them?
After they decided that her and Luke are brother and sister, you can't exactly. They started with that, then they had to.
Yeah, like the woman has to have something to do, right?
Yeah,
which is how that feels.
Isn't that how it usually feels in a movie?
Yeah, so I think that the great thing about this is that because you begin with the situation being a romance but also a political resolution, like that's literally chapter 1 is the emperor going, you have to marry your dead cousin's husband because we have to keep the empire together, period. So that's what you're going off of, and when you find out that the cousin was murdered, not just dead, then that kicks off this other plot point, and so things are beginning to tie together in an interesting kind of way. But I am kind of, some of the sub characters who are a part of this, I'm just like, yeah, because there was no other reason for them to be here. Of course they did that thing. It's kind of, I don't really like when that happens, but that's just me being really, really picky, because otherwise it's just really enjoyable.
It's like reading the back of the Final Fantasy XII game and they're like, yeah, we're in the middle of a rebellion because this guy died, and then you finally play like the first 5 minutes of the game and you realize it's because the 2 characters who are supposed to be the king and queen of the whole entire country went to war against somebody else because they invaded, and then the guy dies. by one specific character, and then you get the plot twist later that it wasn't the specific character you watched to do it. He has a twin brother.
Oh, that's just
No, it's actually really interesting later on, and it actually does make sense. He and the main guy who you think did it, and then it turns out he has a brother. He is captured and he's tortured for a while. He gets let go, and then later on, to resolve a lot of the stuff that's going on, because he's technically not allowed back in the country that he was originally he was working for. So he's not allowed back to work as the knight for the new queen. The old queen, it's the same queen. She got her throne back, whatever. So he's not allowed back because of all of the stuff that he possibly did. However, according to everyone else, his brother is still alive. You kill him. His brother is technically still alive. And he's the protector for the boy king of the neighboring country because you killed his older brother because it's his fault that all of this happened in the first place. So now he's taking the throne, the boy is. And so the guy who turns around and is framed for a lot of this when it's his brother who did it, and now his brother is dead, but everyone thinks the brother is alive, he takes his place.
This sounds like complex world building.
It is complex world building. Speaking of world building, that's today's topic. So I'd like to know what everyone's favorite thing world building is kind of like a complex topic all in itself.
Of course, it is.
Because anybody who doesn't know what world building is,
explain.
World building is essentially all the stuff that's. Alright, so I'm probably going to explain it wrong, so Tony can jump in whenever, and so can Grant.
Okay.
Everyone else can jump in whenever, but I kind of can, because it can be considered different to every single person. I consider world building it's all of the stuff that goes on in the background that's described by your author, or that you see on a TV show, or a video game, or an anime. It's all that little stuff that's going on in the background that creates the space that the main characters are living in.
Yeah.
So
lore is another good word.
Lore is the word that I normally use. I don't use the world building as the word that I use. I use lore because that's all I know. And growing up in video games, that's what you don't call it world building in video games. It's just the lore.
No, world building was a term invented by Tolkien.
It was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because he wrote a whole bunch of essays about, what he was doing as he was writing The Lord of the Rings. And because he was an academic, he explained things to himself by writing essays.
To himself?
Yeah, yes. And he basically was saying, the thing about creating he called them secondary worlds. Mm-hmm. He said, the thing about the primary world is that we all have some understanding of it. Even if it's a unique, specific understanding of it, you still have we have a baseline understanding of the primary world. So when Jane Austen says that the girls put on their dresses when they went to the ball, well, you know what that means. I mean, you know what a dress is, you know what the girls are, and you know what the ball is. I mean, you kind of just go with that. But in a secondary world, the secondary world has to be the same as the primary world, except in one key aspect, which is the secondary world has to exist on its own accord, just like our world does. The only difference is that it isn't our world. And so world building is the way in which you make that work. You literally have to build it from the ground up, was his whole philosophy.
The easiest way to explain what world building is for those at home, it's like when you're playing a video game and you're walking around, and especially in the older games, I'm not sure how much they don't really do it as much in the newer games anymore, but they're starting to bring that back in. When you're walking around in a game and you're trying to find, any type of treasure, and then you accidentally find, a book or a note or something, or a piece of paper or something that your character can then read, and then it has a whole bunch of information that you would not have known otherwise unless you picked up that piece of paper. I think, in my personal opinion, one of the best really weird ways of world building / lore can be found in Resident Evil 7.
Oh, okay.
In Resident Evil 7, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this game. it is a horror game for anybody who is not aware of the Resident Evil series, and if you are, where have you been? Have you been under a rock?
Yes,
but
there are movies as well.
There are movies, but, like, where have you been? There's books, too. Like, it's a thing. But there's a lot of stuff happening in this game, and you are following the character Ethan, who is... Well, Ethan can best be described as he's alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he accidentally, when he's checking his email, he finds an email from his wife, who has been missing for like 3 or 4 years.
I think I played the very, very beginning of this. Yeah.
You probably played like the beginning or the demo or something, which the demo is like horrifying, you know, in itself. And
it wasn't the demo; it was the very beginning of the game. But
like she's been missing for a while, and then all of a sudden he gets this message of just like, I need you to come save me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, whatever. You know how that works.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, I guess I have to go find my wife, because I guess she's alive. She's my wife. I have to go see her. I thought she was missing or dead, whatever.
Yeah.
She's alive. I should go find her. And so he drives himself into the...
Louisiana?
It is the Louisiana, New Orleans, Bayou, swamplands.
Yeah.
He is in, like, the nitty-gritty, like, a boondocks area type stuff.
Yeah.
And his car breaks down, and... One of the really cool parts that I find that you see in the beginning of the game is you walk past this news van. And at first you're just thinking absolutely nothing of it. And here's the thing. I watched a lot of Let's Plays on it. I didn't actually physically play it because I have an adversity to just like anything that's going to make my skin like jump out of my throat.
And it does, yeah. It's really creepy.
But you find a van. And in this van you find like all of this stuff about how a group of people... wanted to go on a paranormal. They're part of like your boogeyman, like Yeti, occult. Like we're gonna go look for cryptids team, and they think that this house that they're going to is haunted, and so they have all this different stuff about how they're gonna go do this. But the van is completely and utterly empty. There's no signs of anyone anywhere. So while you're trying to find your wife, you're accidentally at the same time looking for these characters who were supposedly in this van that you have absolutely no idea, like, who they are, but you think, okay, maybe if they're around here, because the van looks brand new, it doesn't look too hardcore, like, broken down or anything, they might still be in the house, and I might be able to find them and get help. And so, you walk around for a bit, and then you find a few more clues about them being in the house, and then later on, you find one of their bodies just like quite literally underneath the house for absolutely no reason. And then at one point, you find all these different videotapes.
Yeah.
And all these different videotapes have to do with clues to help you along the way in your journey to help find your wife, who is... Or, at this point, cure your wife, because your wife is there. She's just infected by whatever the grossness is that exists in the Resident Evil world, which I believe it's like Virus E, I think. Because the girl's name is like Emily or something. The one who's like the evil character. He's supposed to be there. Which has a whole entire plot twist all in itself, which I'm not going to spoil. You should probably play the game. But you have a videotape where you can see what happens to these characters. And there's a lot of world building that comes along with that. Is like you learn...
Like the van and the tapes and the
the van and the tapes,
pieces of world building on how to
pieces of world building, but there's a lot of different letters that you find around the house that if you don't read these letters, you quite literally don't know a lot of what's going on story wise at all. Resident Evil 7 specifically is not very friendly to you if you do not read the notes and the papers and watch the videotapes that you find along the way.
Right, yeah.
Because if you don't read those, you're literally just like running away from whatever the family member monster that you're fighting at that moment.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. And so I think Resident Evil, the games, not the movies, does some of the best lore building because they just leave it to the notes. And if you're like, yes, you can play the game without it, but if you're not like watching for these little notes and you're not reading them, you have absolutely no idea why anything is happening.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
That makes me... Sorry, I'm yawning.
Stop yawning!
Not because of you.
Stop it! I'm just kidding.
That makes me think of the storytelling method in the Dark Souls series, where like there's almost no context for what you're doing. I mean,
Yeah,
like
Dark Souls is like you're wandering around and you're like, I don't know why I'm doing anything.
Yeah, the atmosphere is amazing, and there's a lot of visual storytelling going on from like moment to moment. But most of the actual world information and lore you find in like item descriptions or like brief conversations you have with some random guy on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Cyberpunk does it similarly too this time around. If you have, I know that you were talking about like getting it at some point in time.
I have it, I just haven't played it yet.
But they do a lot of world building in a lot of the side quests that you play, not the main quest itself. Like, yes, there is a lot of like main quest like lore building.
Yeah.
But you don't get to learn a lot about Liberty City or whatever the town is. I think it's... I don't remember what the town's name is. I haven't played it in a couple weeks. But, like, that whole entire city, a lot of the lore and the underlying, like, problems that are happening within the city, you get from the side quests.
Yeah.
Like, you get that from the side quests. And for people who like books, you see this in, like... Easiest example, Harry Potter, where you see this in like the whole entirety of like the chapters, especially where you get to see what happened to like Snape when he was part of like going to school with James and Lily and all that stuff. When you learn about those things,
Yeah.
Granted,
But
the
Harry
world
Potter's
building.
world building happens much sooner than it
Yes.
has to, because you won't care about James and Lily if you don't have the
Yes.
The thing that makes Harry Potter's world building clever, in my opinion, is that Diagon Alley is a perfect world building chapter because, you know, Hagrid shows up and says, "You're a wizard." They've been chased around the English countryside by owls and letters. You know, and
They'll
it's just-
post
and
on
it's pure-
Sundays.
yeah, like it's pure mayhem, and you're like, "What is going on?" And then Hagrid takes Harry to Diagon Alley, and you suddenly see this very, very small, self-contained, it's almost like a video game level in a way, section of the wizarding world where you see how you get into it requires a certain kind of magic, and then, you know, so you go where? The bank.
Hogwarts
Which is
Legacy does
like-
like the same thing.
It's really
The
interesting
game.
to think about the bank being a cornerstone, because we're all used to hearing about it now, right? It's so popular that it's like, oh yeah, Gringotts Bank, that's where the goblins work. And it's like, no. You think about that as a world building thing. There's literally a place where you keep your money if you're a wizard.
Mm-hmm.
That's world, I mean, that's it seems like a plot thing, because it's like, oh, he has to go there, he has to, you know, see the...
And it gets even better because
really
he has to go down in those roller coaster carts down into the depths of the whole entire thing. And that's another part of the world building, especially within that like bank aspect, is because then you realize how old the wizarding world actually is.
Exactly.
Because if you have to go down to your vault
on
a roller coaster mining cart.
Yes, and you're magical, like you're wizards, you know. But it also sets up a really interesting contrast too, because Harry experiences all of that without knowing until much later in that same book that the wizards and the goblins hate each other.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wait, what?
I think it's really interesting world building wise. Like the wizards and the goblins hate each other, but the wizards trust the goblins to handle their money.
And then there's house elves.
Yeah.
And there's the thing about Harry Potter that's interesting is that the world building happens in the first 3 books as the plot is going along. And then book 4 comes along, and suddenly, especially at the beginning, where you have the Quidditch World Cup and everything and all of that, and suddenly all of your kid characters have to question the world in which they live. They suddenly have to go, wait a minute, isn't house elf slavery? This is a problem.
Yes.
You know, and you have the sharp disagreement between Hermione, who's like, this is a problem. Why are we doing this? They're clearly miserable. And Ron is going, actually, no, they're not. They don't even know what being miserable is unless we tell them. And she's like, that's the problem. Like, so you
I
begin
think there's
to
like a really cool
investigate the
dynamic
world.
too, because you have Ron, who's lived in the wizarding world like all his life.
Whole life, exactly.
So like this is all he's ever known.
Yes.
Like this like height of like privilege is all he's ever known.
And he's never had to question
the
aspect
goblin.
of his
He's
world.
never had to question the goblins. He's never had to question the house elves. He's never had to question any of that. And then you have Hermione and possibly Harry, even though Harry's very much like attentive on other things at the moment, but like you can technically include him in there because he's
Harry. I mean, Harry is
he walks that fine line. But like then you have Hermione, who's completely from the Muggle world in general because she's Muggle born, and so like all she's ever known before she gets to like learn that she's a wizard is learning about all of the things that are happening in the modern history, to which we don't even know if all the wizard kids learn any type of like Muggle history whatsoever.
Well, they do have that class.
Muggle studies.
Muggle studies, yeah.
But that's an elective.
Oh, it is an elective.
It's an elective.
That's pretty funny.
It's an elective.
No, it's not an elective in Harry's timeline.
Is it?
No, it's not an elective in Harry's
Are
timeline.
you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Timeline?
I'm like
What are you talking
98%
about?
certain that
In Harry's day, Muggle studies is, I want to say it's required. There was a point at which it didn't exist at all, initially, and then it's
No, it's an elective.
an elective. Oh,
I forget, is that featured in the movies at all?
Muggle studies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore,
There's so much
like
that they leave.
the wizards don't have to take it if they don't want to.
Fair.
As vice versa,
Yeah,
there's
fair.
no wizarding culture like class for the Muggleborns to take either.
Well, no, because they're wizards now. They're not actually Muggles.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's no like here's all your like you're now a wizard now, but like there's some things that you should probably know about the world. There's no
Sure.
class.
There's no
for
class.
that.
That's true. But I mean, that's the thing that's interesting about. I mean, that's to me that's what makes Harry Potter's world building interesting is that, and there are holes, but you begin with just giving you what the world looks like
Right.
from the perspective of a kid who doesn't know any of this at all. He doesn't even know he is a wizard. And then once he finds out, he gets this like gradual introduction into all of the different things that the wizarding world has to offer to, wizards in general. And then, like including in Prisoner of Azkaban, finding out like, wait, we have a prison? Wait, what does
There's
that mean?
two, and then you find out later there's two prisons.
Yeah, and then you find out who is guarding the prisons, and then one of the most beloved characters of the series at that point goes to that prison because of something he did he had done it in the second book. He went to that prison, but you hear about it, and then you really hear about it in the third one, and you're like, oh God, Hagrid, you went there?
And then you hear about the second prison, and you go, wait, what? There's a second prison?
Yeah, so it's interest, and then there's the other schools that come into play in the fourth book. So, but by the time you get to book 4, that's the first time that it happens sort of towards the end of book 3, but it's more personal because it has to do with Harry's parents.
I have one
but
bone to
there's
pick with
more,
that movie then.
In the fourth book, you get this deep sense of all of the kids are suddenly going, wait a minute, the world in which we live is based on some really awful oppression. And they all take sides over the next few books, over books 4, 5, and 6, and like to the point where one of the most interesting plot lines in the story and one of the darkest ones is Draco Malfoy joining the Death Eaters in book 6 and taking. Think of how devastating it is to any student to be told, in order to join this club and to learn these spells, I have one task and one task only for you. I need for you to kill
A person.
I need for you to kill the principal.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just anybody. Even if it's just killing a teacher. No, I need you to kill the principal. Let's forget that he's Dumbledore. Let's forget that he's the most powerful wizard ever, whatever. No. I need for you, a student who
You're
goes
16.
to this school, I need for you to kill the principal of your school.
Mm-hmm.
That alone is like an insane thing to ask a child to do as an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he knows that it's going to buy him into this like super secret club that has I mean, it's a death cult, but still, I mean, he's buying his way into this death cult.
I'm sure they have passwords and stuff. It's okay.
But that's the password.
Can I have cookies?
The password is kill the principal. Like,
oh, okay.
that's the psychological damage that does to someone who is offering himself up to do it. Like, that to me is a fascinating facet of, somewhat world building. Anyway,
2 things.
I forgot what my point was going to be.
1 thing. First thing. My only real gripe, and it's just with the movies, it's not with the books, is that in the 4th movie, Durmstrang and Bo Bottens are supposed to be co-ed. Fun fact. If anybody didn't know that. The 2 schools that come for the Goblet of Fire tournament are co-ed in the book.
They are, but I never cared.
No, but they specifically split them up, so I have that.
Because
gripe.
if you look at the way that the characters shake out,
yeah,
the movie actually made more sense because
I know, but still, I still have that gripe.
All of the female characters that you're supposed to care about come from Bo Bottens, and all of the male characters you're supposed to care about come from Durmstrang. So it's like,
but
why
anyways,
are they co-ed?
Second, to just go with a new topic, both of you are kind of like creators in your own right. Because you write, you do film thingies. What is your favorite way of doing world building?
Oh, God.
I'm gonna throw you into the fire. Congratulations.
Right. Would you like to go?
I was going to make a comment about the banks.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay. Make your comment about the bank.
I feel like it's one of those weird practical things that you wouldn't really think about. Like, of course they need somewhere to put their money because it's a completely parallel world to ours. And it's,
Yes.
Wizards have to buy stuff too,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do they, though?
I guess not.
But that's what's interesting about it is because there are shops.
Yeah, I know.
So if there are shops, who's paying these people to? I mean,
Yeah,
they have to buy their
Do they have
wands.
checkbooks? What
No,
happens
but
if they
no,
don't get enough
but
money
do you
out of the bank to
But
buy
do
something?
you know what's fascinating about that? They have to buy their wands.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to even control magic in the first place, you have to have money.
And the weird part is you're not actually buying the wand. You're paying the wand maker who made your wand. Commission.
Buying the wand.
Yeah.
It's like buying art. It's
yeah,
like
still.
You're buying the art. Anyway, yes. What?
No, and I was just going to say, a lot of times, I think it's the little weird practical things that make the world feel huge and fill it out that, you wouldn't really think about or you don't even necessarily need, but the fact that the creator thought of these things, it's all the more convincing. I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
yes.
I guess for me, world building, it's all maybe breadcrumbs. You want people. You don't necessarily want to explain everything. You want people to see possibilities, and you create an internal consistency that works, and then you. Like I said, you give people possibilities. These strands could lead this way, blah 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 blah. I don't know.
Yeah, I find it's interesting you mentioned internal consistencies because it's a common thread in it's a common thought in world building threads and world building conversations. People will talk about internal, including reading culture talks a lot about internal consistency. One of the things that I find fascinating about world building, if it's done thoroughly enough, is inconsistency. We live in an inconsistent world.
This is true.
And so, one of the things that frustrates the heck out of me when I'm reading a book that has done its world building homework, or purports to have done its world building homework, is that you'll have all of these incredibly technologically advanced cultures all coexisting, and no one's thought to ask the question of, but what about all of the non-technologically advanced cultures? Where are they? What do they look like? How do they feel? What do they care about? Oh, and what forms of oppression are happening all over the place? Because in our world, you don't get as far as the 15th century Europeans without a heck of a lot of oppression. And they show up on the shores of 15th century Africa and looked around and went, what the heck is going on here? Because they did not understand why 15th century Africa didn't look like 15th century Europe. It was just but that's the point, is if you study, at any point in history, if you study multiple cultures, multiple countries, multiple continents, you'll discover that they're all at massively different points. And so when people say things like, well, in the 15th century, it's like, pause.
Where?
Because in 15th century China, it was like studying spaceships, compared to what was happening in 15th century Europe.
Or 15th century, like, I don't know, whichever indigenous people's living over in a different area.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive, the massive cultural shifts are all happening at different times based on different events and cultural...
That's like sorry, I just had to remember where 15th century is. That's like Renaissance, like... Early Renaissance to like late Renaissance, because it's 1401 to 1500. So,
but only in certain parts of the world.
Right.
Yeah, other parts of the world.
I'm talking more Italy because that's what I know is Renaissance specifically.
That's Western. I mean, that's Western Civ, right? That's Western. We all learn that because why? Because that's where America.
I mean, I had to.
America's power structure.
I had to because that's art history.
Of course.
I had to learn it in art history.
Who's art history? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, but then I did take a class later on about other different places.
Yeah, that's one of the things that so for me, when I'm looking at world building in someone else's work or in my own work, there's the main story, right? Like you think about, who are the characters here? Where do they come from? What are their cultures? All those kinds of things. But in order to really, truly flesh things out, I expand beyond that and look at the world as a whole. It's like, okay, so they live in this town that is in this country, that is in this, whatever. But how did what's happening here in this country shape what happened to the neighboring country? And is there an empire to the north? And is there, what's going on in the world? Because, you don't have trains in one part of the world without coal coming from another part of the world.
Oh, 15th century China's
like,
where all the cool porcelain comes from.
Who even developed, how was the coal getting from that place to this place for them to even think up the idea to create trains? I mean, it's a whole, we're so used to the world being so interconnected, but it's not always been that way. So how do things develop over time in certain corners of the world that don't develop in other corners of the world? I love looking at that kind of thing, and I think the one property that does this the best, because it does it so slyly that if you're not paying attention, you won't notice, because it's just good old-fashioned adventure stories in space. But Star Wars does an incredible job of world building all of those massive multiple different, because even though, let's be real, the idea of a planet-wide culture is insane. Like that does not work.
The games do it very well
break
too.
Down. But if you really look at just the whole expanded universe that Star Wars has been since 1977, and even in 1977 in that original film, there are hints to the way that the world. If you look at Tatooine, there's the gangster Jabba the Hutt who has these smugglers who are going to smuggle for him. What are they smuggling? Where are they taking it? You don't necessarily know, and you don't need to know, but you know that the guy who's got a price on his head is doing it. And he feels that urgency. He's more terrified of the slug that he's just insulted than he is of the stormtroopers chasing him.
Yes.
Listen, I've insulted tons of slugs.
It's the one that's sitting on the side of your house. How dare you?
Yeah, how dare you?
But and then you have this structure that's falling apart, right? That is hinted at because the princess is like, I'm a member of the Imperial Senate, and Darth Vader's like, don't make me laugh. And then the Tarkin comes in and is like, we've got rid of the Senate, and everyone at the table freaks out. They're like, wait, what? You can't do that. How are you going to have control? And they're like, we have a Death Star.
We have a dictatorship. Congrats. Let's go.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments, like not even just world building moments, but moments in a movie, is in the original Star Wars when they first go to the cantina, because the whole universe opens up. And like I was saying, possibilities. Like there's a mantis man over there. There's a wolf man over there.
Yes.
And like you don't know all their stories unless you read the 1,200 books that ruins it all. But,
Yeah.
We should have an
Everyone's all-
episode on Star Wars books in general.
No, but I mean, I think it's true that world building, that's one of the things that is fascinating about world building, is if you can have those like stories that aren't happening, or they are happening, but you don't know what they are.
You need to like be able to peer barely into the periphery of these stories, and you, as long as you feel that these stories are happening, and there's like more people are having their own experiences than just your protagonist or whatever.
Yeah, I was telling Grant earlier, one of the world that bothers me the most is the Hunger Games world.
Okay.
Explain. I have ranted on this podcast before about the Hunger Games world building, and I will do so again.
No, please do so. I enjoy this. We have 15 minutes.
It's sloppy.
Okay.
She knew she was writing a dystopia, and she wanted to use the United States of America as the dystopia, and instead of properly asking and answering that question, she set up the scenario first and let the scenario lead the way in which the world was built. But if you think about the United States of America as we know it, even as she knew it then, in 2006, 7, 8, what is one of the core tenets of United States politics?
You're asking me questions now.
Religion.
Well, yeah.
We have never had a president of the United States who didn't belong to a church. Not
Right.
a single one.
Right.
How is it? We have an entire wing of American politics that gets all of its juice from
Religion.
being religiously connected. And they accuse the other wing of not being religiously connected enough, whether or not that's true. The point is, religion is a huge over and understated
don't
part of
see
American
any of
politics.
that really
There's
in
not a
there.
single church mentioned in the Hunger Games. Not one. They don't enter one. There's no mention of what happens to them. Why? This is supposed to be the future of America. Where are the churches? Where are the people who manned them?
Kind of like
Where are the people
Divergent,
who lost
where they
to
do
them?
that
Well, you
similar.
There's no Bibles. There's no, Torah. There's no prayers. There's no.
This is an alternate. It's an alternate history where we elected Bernie Sanders.
but even still, I mean, you understand that like the core. And obviously, in order to have a Pan Am, right, the UN has to have failed. Like we have no connections with the other countries, but even that's not mentioned. There's no mention of any of the rest of the world.
Because
It's
like,
as
if we're supposed to be like a dystopian United States, what happened to the other countries?
what happened to them? Yeah,
Are other countries ever mentioned?
never mentioned.
It's like in
Never.
Fallout.
Was there a big war or something? Or
We don't know.
There's a paragraph description. So I remember reading this paragraph the last time I read the Hunger Games, and I thought, that's cheating. It's cheap world building. The paragraph description, which Katniss, who is the central character, who kind of went to school but kind of didn't, says, "Oh yes, after a series of floods and basically a whole bunch of
Natural disasters.
Yes, after that happened, then the 13th districts were the survivors straggling forth to create whatever. And it's like, yeah, that sounds cute on paper in a first draft. That's not world building.
That sounds
yeah,
dumb.
like at first I could see it like why no? Like if it took place right after these disasters, like I could see America or North America being isolated, but they have crazy technology now and everything. Like if there's other, you'd think it would revert back to a global.
Yeah, they have hover trains.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
go to Europe.
And that's another thing. That's the other thing. The techno map in the Hunger Games makes no sense. It makes sense for the discrete 13 districts, right? But that's not how the world works, or was even working at the time that the book was being written. And this is supposed to be the future? I don't buy it. Like, it doesn't. It falls apart way too quickly. Whereas if you go back and you look in the 60s at Dune, the world building is juicy and solid.
It's like
Because it seems simpler than it really is. I mean, because of course it does, right? He's sort of like slowly unfurling all of this to show you what this planet really is and what it means.
And he's not a very technical writer. He doesn't spend like 2 pages describing how the ships work or how this technology works.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true.
to
Yeah.
piggyback off your Hunger Games thing. My thing is Divergent.
Oh,
Just-
everyone picks.
Same thing. It's set in Chicago.
Everyone picks.
What has happened to the rest of the country?
It's a copy of a copy of a
But
copy. Starting with
here's
the
the
Hunger Games.
here's the thing about Divergent. Divergent does better than Hunger Games in that aspect. Divergent tells you what happens to the rest of the country. Hunger Games never does.
What happened to the rest of the country?
It's in the Legion. I can't remember. It's been a long time since. But there is a description. There isn't, because you actually leave Chicago and there are other cells in the country. So it's another cell that takes you away from the Chicago cell at the end
So
of
are they
the
doing
second
something
book.
like similar but like in other like cities?
They're doing different kinds of studies and that kind of thing, and so that's where Triss kind of learns, like, wait a minute, we weren't alone the whole time. What is going on? And she has to learn that other places do things differently. There's a bigger world out there than just you and four. You know, and that's the whole point of Allegiant. And so people can give the whole, oh my
like,
god.
I'll give her that. It's just like very just like centralized, and you rarely.
Of course, but I mean
like
that's a story. Harry Potter is nothing but Hogwarts, 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 and then all of a sudden, oh, we're at the Ministry. Why? The plot took us there. Like, I mean, that's just storytelling, right? I mean, you know, how many Star Wars stories have started on Tatooine, and people are like, why are we still going to this desert planet? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, a story happens there.
And then you go to, like...
It's because of the cantina. We have to unpack all the cantina stories.
I won't rest until every owl man in the cantina has a fully fleshed out backstory.
Exactly. But I mean, it's one of the things that I feel like, if you're thinking about world building, it's one of the reasons that the live action Batman, all live action Batmans pale in comparison to any other format. For one reason. The world building is not kooky enough. All of the world building in Batman comics, in Batman video games, in Batman animated, especially animated, they go gonzo. I mean, this stuff is, and they're not afraid to go gonzo.
See, I don't see the craziness as a necessity for it to work as like a Batman story or something.
I don't know that it's necessary. I think it improves upon.
It depends which characters, maybe. Even.
Oh,
like
it
if
certainly
you have
depends,
Killer
yes.
Croc, maybe lighten the mood a little bit. You know, you don't.
But that's the thing about Killer Croc is that, like, I'm glad none of the live actions have ever done anything with Killer Croc, because I feel like they just couldn't handle it. There's not enough. The live action movies, because they're being told to a major American audience, they are so concerned with, they can't make it too weird, right? Killer Croc is weird.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like, I mean, that's just a weird concept. You can get an American audience to buy Mr. Freeze, right? Because it's a love story that makes him who he is. You can get an American audience to even buy the Scarecrow, right? Because we all have fears, and, you know, he's a failed psychologist, and he's gone a little cuckoo, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's hard to get people to buy the League of Shadows. It's hard to get people. I mean, unless you do like a James Bond Batman movie, which would be kind of cool.
I mean, with the League of. Okay.
They kind of did the League of Shadows with Christopher Nolan's thing, but it wasn't weird enough.
Okay.
Because, I mean, there's the whole Lazarus Pit thing, and, I mean, Ra's al Ghul is like... They never explain, for example, in the Nolan films, how Ra's al Ghul never dies. They just kill him off. Why? Because if you bring him back, you have to explain Lazarus Pits. And if you explain Lazarus Pits, that's just weird. Mm-hmm. No one's going to go there with you.
And given I have almost no knowledge of the greater, like, Batman comic landscape,
weird.
I've read like the big critically acclaimed ones, but
okay, another example: Clayface.
Yeah.
They've never used Clayface in a movie. Why? Explain Clayface. I mean, really, an American actor becomes big monster thing. What? I mean, like, make that work. I feel like I could make it work in a movie. But the point is that, like, the Batman universe is, yeah, unnecessarily large and chaotic, but it's another reason, like, for example, X-Men, I think a big reason that X-Men movies have not caught the popularity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, aside from the fact that there are some poor story decisions that have been made, X-Men is effing weird, like, from the get-go. And if you don't lean into the weird, you don't have a storyline. So I think that there's a way to do excessive world building that is attractive to an audience. And then there are other ways that, you know, I don't know. I feel like what is my point? I don't know what my point is. I've lost it.
I do want to mention one property that does excessive world building. Like, it goes so far that it's bad. But it goes so far that it goes around, like, all the way around again to being good again, and that's Kingdom Hearts.
Oh my god!
It's so
that needs a whole episode about it all in itself.
It's so stupid and convoluted, but I genuinely love it.
I have heard this. My brother's a big Kingdom Hearts fan.
I have no idea who gets which ones.
Oh god.
Okay.
All right.
So, what do we got?
Godzilla.
pre-Michael Bay Optimus Prime. It doesn't specify that, but I'm specifying that.
Why are you specifying it?
I don't care if I lose because of it.
You can't lose. Optimus Prime cannot lose to Godzilla.
Yeah,
maybe.
I guess it depends on.
Make the case. I've never seen a Godzilla movie. I have no interest in seeing that. The kaiju hold no interest to me.
Pacific Rim's a good movie.
I've heard this. Isn't Pacific Rim more on the Optimus Prime side of things?
I mean, there's giant lizard thing aliens, but there's also robots fighting.
So literally, we're just doing the plot of Pacific Rim.
Hey, how about instead of doing this, we all just watch Pacific Rim?
That sounds great to me.
Okay.
That sounds like a great idea.
I can't. I have no dog in this fight because I don't know anything about God. And speaking of world building, so Godzilla shoots world building in the foot, right? I remember watching this video in which a science fiction writer was talking about how much she loves Godzilla because she said the great thing. She said, she's an African futurist. She coined that term, in fact, and she said for her, the thing that always irritates her about Western canon world building in science fiction is that there's always these rules and this, everything has to be pinned down and world building is a term. And she said that's so stupid. In Godzilla movies, Godzilla bursts out of the water, eats half of Japan, and then goes back in the water again. There's no explanation. There's no reason he does it. He doesn't have a beef. He just.
I'm hungry. I want a snack.
That's it.
And then somehow Japan repopulates for again a few years later.
Yeah, and she's like, I love that. And you can see there are whole canons of manga lives and breathes that. Like shonen lives and breathes that whole idea of like it just rose up, it ate us. Maybe we fought it back and lost. We don't know, and then it disappeared.
You could say Attack on Titan. I know what you're talking about.
Even what's Neon Genesis Evangelion is the same. That's the whole principle behind it. Is like the angels came up. We didn't know what they were. We built stuff to shoot it. They killed us anyway. We went underground. We built more stuff to shoot it, and we still died.
Gundam Wing has kind of a similar.
It's a whole thing. I mean, speaking of Pacific Rim and Optimus Prime, I mean,
Yeah.
So I guess the moral of the story is Japan loses. Oh,
we should just have an episode about mecha. Like